today. Hello, I am Stacy Hines, CEO of Epic Transformation Limited, a workforce transformation company that specializes in leadership development and digital transformation. And I will be facilitating this epic conversation today that we are having with none other than the CEO of Symptai Consulting Limited, also known as Chief Chairperson for this wonderful symposium that we are now bringing to a close. So welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. So
My absolute pleasure to be here with you. You're one of my favorite personalities.
That's good to know. Thank you so much. We're going to have a riveting conversation today about one of my favorite topics, and I think it's also one of your favorite topics, and that is really about leadership, and in particular, leadership in today's day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of my favorite topics. I get passionate about it. When I was preparing for this and just doing a post on LinkedIn, I was saying I was nervous, not because I'm nervous, but because just so much energy resonates when I get an opportunity to talk about leadership.
Yes, indeed. All right, so everybody that's joining, I'm just going to invite you to, engage with us, participate in the conversation. Many of you out there may be leaders in your own right, whether you're already in the C-suite or you're in middle management. And some of you who are out there, you may actually be aspiring towards leadership. And for all of those audiences, this conversation is very fitting for you. Now, today's intention is to share with you the 3 areas of mastery that we feel are necessary for transformational leadership, which ultimately is what is required when you think about reimagining the leadership space. And so Marlon has crafted his 3 areas that he believes, boy, if you can master these things, you have it pan lock. Like leadership is going to take off for you. You're going to be able to create additional leaders, enroll your team, and really be able to deliver on the outcomes and vision of the organization. So let's dive right in, Marlon. What are the top 3 areas of mastery? Tell us what you have for us.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Let me just bring my slide presentation up and unveil the mystery. It's not so much a mystery. I want to talk about purpose, both at the leader and at the team level. I want to talk about awareness and the opportunity to transform if that's an area that you're lacking in as a leader. And I want to talk about imagination, which drives and controls your energy. And then as a bonus, we'll touch on the very touchy subject of vulnerability.
Okay, I was about to say, because I know I can count. I'm not so good at the maths, but
so it's 3 plus 1.
We had said 3, but guess what, folks? We are in for a treat because Mr. Cooper threw in a bonus, and absolutely vulnerability. And I love the way that that's kind of central and touching all the other points, because the truth is that vulnerability does lie at the foundation of all these different areas of mastery. So where are we going to start? We're going to start with purpose. I think everything starts with, what is the intention behind what you are creating? So talk to us a little bit about purpose and the context there.
Well, let me start off by telling you a story, right? So when I started working in 1995, and I'm aging myself, I'm a dinosaur. But when I started working in 1995, I was working at Air Jamaica, and I just left university, honors degree. I was like, oh, I'm ready to change the world. So I got this great job at Air Jamaica working in the finance department. And I was doing bank reconciliations, which would take up maybe 30 minutes 1 day a week. And then I spent the rest of the time stacking checks. And these were checks that had been used and come back. So these were the used checks that came back from the bank, and I was stacking them in numerical order. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not changing the world. So purpose from that perspective, and I have it both at a leadership level and at a team level, is around how we make that connection between what the person at the lowest level of the organization is doing with what the person at the highest level of the organization is trying to do. So me sitting as CEO, responsible for strategy, how do I get the person who's sitting at the first level in the organization to have that same vision and be as passionate as me? I know that if they do happen to be stacking checks, it is because it is directly aligned with the strategic purpose that we are trying to create.
No, that's really good. I actually really like the point when you talked about, thinking to yourself, I'm not changing the world. And ultimately, the space that we're in now, that's literally like everybody's business. Everybody's business is about creating that significant impact. And even if you are stacking those checks, as an example, thank God for EFT. Um,
Oh, thank
right?
God.
Thank
Yeah.
God for EFT. Even if you are doing the more transactional type of
Yes.
tasks, you want to feel connected to that bigger vision. You want to feel like every single transaction that you are counting or tracing or whatever it is that is at that level, that it is a part of a bigger purpose, and that you are enrolled in that vision, and that you are contributing. So you are not just a cog in a wheel. You are an active contributor in delivering on that purpose that has been set by your leadership.
No, absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of that with today's what we call the millennials, right? Where they quickly become disengaged from organizations because they can't see purpose in what they're doing. And not only that either, but also too because the things that are important to them from a purpose perspective are not necessarily the things that the organization is pursuing. And then that becomes critical. And unlike us, or unlike me rather, sorry, Stacey, you're much younger than me. Unlike me, rather, they're not just going to stick around and just and gut it out. They're going to leave and find something else to do.
Oh, can you stick a pin right there? One of the key reasons why we have been experiencing this great resignation that the entire world is observing is because there is very little purpose built into a lot of the work that people are doing. So that part of the millennials and whichever generation, I can't remember which one is X or A, B,
Um,
Delta or whatever, that comes after that, right? Is
yes,
there is this extraordinary desire to feel connected to a bigger vision. And so we have so many persons now that are creating their own companies and
yes,
sharing that purpose. You have a lot of self-made leaders, self-made multimillionaires, and it's attractive to become one of those. Maybe because I can, be all about my purpose, or I
yes.
can tap into another type of leader who is sharing from that space. And so, purpose, I think, Marlon, is actually a really key area of focus for our leaders of today, especially in the more traditional organizations.
Yes, absolutely. And when we started the conference, one of our keynotes was Thomas Ilves, who's a former president of Estonia. And when I look at, and I think I have the slide up here, he spoke about change leadership. And one of the things that marveled me about Estonia is what they did in 5 years. All of that's on the screen, that's them changing a society from being an analog society, if you will, to becoming a digital society. And they were able to execute using technology, changing people's mind about how they view government and trust, creating services that resonated with the customer, which is what a digital experience does, right? And they're able in the space of 5 years to do that's what 4, 8, 10, 11 different significant initiatives. If they were able to do one of those initiatives in 1 year, in 5 years, that would have been significant. But to have 11 of those initiatives done in 5 years, that talks about, that's not just the leader at the top who is thinking and seeing that. That's a whole conversation and a whole process of engaging so many persons. And this was done at a societal and government level. So, think about Jamaica's context. People are like, oh yeah, government, waste of time. So think about all of that's required to take that vision and to execute it and to enroll everyone in the conversation and lead them all towards the same direction. It's just absolutely mind-blowing.
Absolutely. I really agree with you. And I did enjoy his presentation and the discussion around just the many different ways that they actually created that trust And I
Yes.
believe they created the trust amongst the citizens through showing that we are on mission, we are on purpose, we are being on purpose, and
Yeah.
we are focused more on what is in it for you, the benefit
Yes.
for you,
Yes.
and hoping that you'll come along for that journey. And clearly, based on this, I mean, he didn't have slides in his presentation, but just the different things that were implemented and how much innovation and imagination was put into it. It all started with this purposeful way of being, this intention, this thinking along a particular path, and then enrolling the citizens who ultimately are the ones that are going to create that change,
Yeah.
enrolling them in the journey.
Yeah, and one of the key words that you mentioned there, of course, is trust, right? Because to that is being for me, that's like the elixir, that's the magic piece, that's the gold dust, right? When as a CEO, you are able to engage every level of the organization and have them trust and buy into and believe the vision that you're going after. Because remember, the thing doesn't exist in them. These are just words and thoughts and ideas and processes that you're executing. These are checks that you're stacking, and but you but there's a vision that's to be seen and to be realized, right? To create that trust that people continue to do what they're doing and bring their energies and their full selves to it. And then when you get the first outcome, it kind of creates a lot of momentum around it, and people, okay, this is working, and they go, oh shit, this is pardon my French, this is really amazing, and it just becomes a snowball effect. And so that for me, once you get that trust, then you are now in lockstep, and momentum gets added to what you're trying to do. And so yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that trust. Yeah.
No, great. Thank you so much for that. So we are now anchored in the first area of mastery, which is purpose, right? Now
Yes.
take us from purpose to what's required to actually get this thing going. So you talked about the momentum, but how do we even start to build that? What's the second area of mastery that we're stepping into now?
So this is awareness, and this one I took from Peter Sundergaard's presentation. I'm just tying back everybody's presentations from the keynotes as we go through, and he gave this 10x3 model, talking about at every level of leadership in an organization, you need to identify how many of these 10 items your leaders have proficiency or mastery in, and how they're using the 3 dimensions at the bottom, the 3 leadership dimensions. And the one that caught my eye in all of it was leadership transformation. Because for most organizations, and especially tech organizations like myself, it's all about the tech and the data in the middle there, right? It's all about the tech and the data, and let's do phenomenal things with it, and let's see what happens. But then what about multiplicity of leadership, which for me is bringing all these different facets of yourself as a leader together, as a leader to the conversation, to be able to create that purpose, create that trust, create that enrollment, have those conversations, see what people's needs are, make sure that you're connecting to your internal customers, your employees, make sure that you're connected to your external customers and serving them, right? And then the transformational leadership, which for me is very challenging because it means that I have to look at myself. And so awareness becomes important because I have to see myself and see how I'm showing up, and how the way that I'm showing up and the way that I'm being is affecting the purpose and affecting the vision and affecting the strategy. So sorry, let me stop so you can get in, Stacey, but it was really fascinating to see it. And that's kind of how it resonated with me. I immediately shared it with my team on WhatsApp and said, yeah, all my leaders, look at this. Which areas do you need to work on? Which areas do you see as an area of strength for you?
Absolutely. And I truly appreciated this one page kind of definition of what is required in order to really create the type of change that we need now. And awareness is, it's sometimes a cliche term, especially these days when consciousness is all over the place and everybody's talking about it. But one of the things that I liked was this quote that I found by Sheryl Sandberg. I'm a quote lover. And she said, we cannot change what we are not aware of. And
Yes.
once we are aware, we cannot help but change.
That's good. Say,
Isn't
say,
that
say that
profound?
again. Say,
Yes, we cannot change what we are not aware of.
aware of.
And once we are aware, we
Can't help
cannot help but
but
change.
change. Yes.
Right? And I think that when we look at the scope of what is required for leadership in today's day and age, we're becoming more and more aware of how we as leaders have to rise to the occasion. We ourselves have to actually shift into transformational leadership in order to bring and enroll other leaders inside of the organization, because every person inside the organization is a leader, right? No matter what level you're at. But in order
Absolutely.
for all of us to create that shift, we have to be aware of where we are, what's our location in the space of needing to create this change, and then be willing and available to the shifts that are required in order to actually create that significant and dramatic transformation.
Absolutely, Cecil. One of the things that we practice here at Symptai that we learned from, well, I learned from one of my favorite conscious leaders and adopt here is that we have this principle where whenever we go into a meeting, we do a check-in. And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being, oh my God, this is absolutely best day ever. I can see SpongeBob dancing around and playing with jellyfish and going, best day ever, right? I won't sing and embarrass myself anymore. That's a 10. And then a 1 is, oh my God, just pull all the curtains down earth. I don't want to get out of bed today, right? And we ask people to check in and tell us where they are. And one of the things, so somebody would say I'm an 8 or somebody would say I'm a 4. And then one of the other things that we're trying to do as well is to say, get persons to not feel sorry for you because you're a 4 and then celebrate you because you're a 10. What we're saying is that what this exercise is doing is that it's telling the entire organization that I'm meeting with that this is where I am. I'm being open and vulnerable and telling you where I am. And if I am below a 5, then I need some more space and some grace today. So if this is going to be a creative meeting, don't lean on me too much because you're probably not going to get anything from me. And then the other guys were the 10. So we learn to create space for each other. And we learn before we even get into anything, do we have the awareness and the capacity to actually execute what we're going to be executing, or do we step away and do something else? So, as I think about awareness, I just wanted to share that as one of the things that I learned and that we incorporate at the beginning of every meeting that we do here at Symptai.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually have a similar practice with my clients and in leading workshops, because I do find that it is a very simple way to step into awareness. It gives
Yes,
everyone access because everybody knows how they feel, right? You just usually end up, either internalizing it and keeping it in your head and going around in your mind, or you end up complaining about what's not right, and so what this does, with what your check-in does, is actually invite some vulnerability in the space in a safe way, so that persons can feel that they have the ability to really show, this is where I am today. And I don't know how helpful I can be in the strategy space.
yes,
But maybe if I can just focus on what I have to do with the technology, with the tasking, I think I can manage that. But if you're trying to get me to be, transformational and create these big ideas,
not today.
not today, and maybe even not agile, because when I
Yes,
look at this template, so to speak,
yes,
it requires you to show up in a particular way
yes,
and to do so as consistently as possible. I think part of what we do when we're not in this space of awareness is we think we are being asked to show up as a 10 every single day.
yes,
And the truth is that's really not who we are as human beings, right? But we get stuck in the doing side and forget about bringing our true beingness to everything, including the workplace, right? And so when I look at this list and I'm like, my gosh, if any day you come into work and you're not feeling like a visionary, or you can't bother with a customer, it's almost as though, boy, I shouldn't bother to go to work today at all. But
right.
but there's opportunity in all of the things that we are creating as leaders inside organizations that reside within this one pager. and that you have access to step into at any given point in time, regardless of where you are on that scale.
You know, as you break it down like that, I can literally see the aspects that appear to be more doing aspects and the aspects that appear to be more being aspects, right? And one of the things that we talk about in this organization is that we don't want you to be schizophrenic. We want you to bring your entire self into the organization. We don't want you to have multiple personalities, right? You know, we don't want you to pretend like you're great when you're not great. And we also don't want you to be low all the time as well either. So there are other things that we have in place for that in terms of wellness. But just looking at it, I can see literally, okay, yes, and customer focus that requires some imagination and some engagement. Also requires some hard tasking as well, you know. So, but the ecosystem mindset that requires sharing and being open to collaborate, and that might be with my competitors, and that might, you know, and it's for my customers' benefit, and so you can start to get a sense of the energy, and of course you're getting excited about it, right? But you can start to get a sense of the energy that comes with that, you know. So yeah, that's really good.
So you gave me a beautiful segue. Like I don't even have to work so hard today. You gave me a beautiful segue into the conversation around it is imagination, but you use the word energy. Talk
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about how you're connecting the two things.
Right. So when this conversation started on Monday, and I did the opening, I started by saying everything is created twice. First in the imagination or in the mind, and then in reality. As a matter of fact, reality is always not a great copy of what was in the imagination, right? Which is absolutely amazing, because when you look at all these things that we have in reality, especially from a tech perspective, and you go like, this is a bad copy of what I actually thought of creating, then it's actually phenomenal. But imagination is what creates that kind of dreaming and that daydreaming and that idea that there's something that's missing, that if it existed, it would make everybody's day brighter, make everybody's world better. It's that kind of just big visionary look on things. And I tie energy to it because what energy does for me is that energy is, if imagination is a rocket ship, and energy is a rocket fuel.
That's right.
Right? That's how it feels for me. And energy for me means that you have the ability to do or not to do. Similar to what we're talking about with awareness. I don't have the energy to focus on the customer today. You can't, if that's where your imagination is completely locked off and none of that is available or accessible to you. So for me, the two things are tied together. The energy fuels the imagination and allows us to create.
Yes. And I'd like to actually pick up on something you said, so that I don't lose my train of thought. But one of the areas that we all have to work on as leaders is in relating to our team when we're in the midst of creation, right, or implementation. If you're in a tech company, you know that, you know, it's all dreaming and a lot of imagining. Even as you're going through, maybe if you have to do an RFP or you're pitching, you're doing the proposal, like that phase is just like big dream, big picture, yes, and we can create this and we can build a bridge to the moon and everything is possible. And then when you now shift into implementation and you start to actually have the rubber from the tire hit the road, or the rocket actually now hitting the atmosphere of Earth, that's when you now start to really see all the dots connecting. That's when you're seeing your imagination and your energy meeting up. And as leaders, oftentimes we stop paying attention to our team there. What we start to do is we start to just look for the outcomes. I want to see the results. And not recognizing that maybe there are one or two team members, or maybe the entire team is struggling with their fuel, right? And so what starts to happen is, because they're not aligned energetically with their imagination, the customers start to have a problem. You start to have meetings where they're just complaining because their expectations aren't being met. Or it is that, you know, they have had little problems, but because the team is out of their awareness, because that being side is gone now, them just doing, they haven't been able to stay connected to what the customer is expecting and what is to be realized. And so it creates friction. And when that happens, it really is an opportunity for us as leaders to step in and support our teams with elevating their energy levels so that they are reconnected to the ultimate purpose. They are connected and tapped into the awareness of where they're sitting, and they know what type of energy they need to be bringing, and they can negotiate when they're not in that space. Now, if you are a leader who you too are struggling with being aligned between what is being imagined and the energy that needs to be brought to that, it makes it very difficult for you to connect those dots. So if you're able to actually tap back into, boy, what did Marlon say again? I don't feel like my true self here. You can now look back at the areas of focus and be vulnerable enough, which is what the next thing that Marlon's going to talk about, to really identify and discuss this with your team.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacey. We're gonna end on vulnerability, right? Or end this part of our conversation on vulnerability. I'm gonna share a story that ties back from energy to vulnerability. So at the beginning of our financial year last year, because our year ends this month, June. So we're in the last days. At the beginning of or just before the financial year began, myself and Corjane sat down, and she had set some very aggressive sales targets for her business development team. And the performance the year before was kind of mixed. The team was new, so they were just getting their feet wet, etc. And she and I were talking about it yesterday and having a really great laugh about it, because the team started to feedback to her about how they were feeling about the new targets, and they were not feeling good. The energy was, the words were coming up, it's unfair, it's mean, and one of the things that we do here is that we try to create space for people to be honest about how they feel. I tell people all the time, every time you experience an emotion that's real, that's what you feel, that's what you're experiencing. Now, whether or not that emotion is going to help you to get the outcome is something else. That's something totally separate. So we had to sit down and have conversations, and we're like, I acknowledge how you feel. I acknowledge why this would be unfair to you, because last year, if you only did 60% of your target, how can we then triple the target this year? That's unfair. So you must be feeling unfair. And then we had to have a conversation and say, okay, how can we do it? So, because one of the things that happens with persons is that they don't feel heard. Mm-hmm. And just that simple step of acknowledging that you are right, it's unfair and it's perfectly okay for you to feel that way. And then we said, how can you do it? Mm-hmm. And it took a minute to shift from that energetic space because how is a creative space, right? Because now you have to go search and find ways. And then, can I tell you, when I called Corjane yesterday, I said to Corjane, I want to meet with those two ladies again. And as a matter of fact, I want to have a fireside chat in the office about it, because one of them has already passed their target, and the other one is about to. So the moment that she passes her target as well, it's definitely going to pass her target for the year. We're going to have a fireside chat about it. We're going to say, let's go back to memory lane and remember when your energy was, and so you could not see, all you could feel was, and then, so vulnerability for me allows us to create a safe space for people to talk about how they truly feel, and for us to acknowledge how people feel and acknowledge that it's perfectly okay for them to feel the way they feel. I have this conversation with my kids. I say, any emotion that you have, you are allowed, because we have this habit of not allowing people to feel what they feel. And then I made the distinction for them that, okay, now that you feel that way, what do you want to do? Because that feeling might not be able to get you to where you're trying to go. So how do we shift from that and change the energy and tap back into imagination to get to where we're trying to get to?
No, absolutely. And what I also appreciate is the ability to create safe space. I think we, as leaders, especially when you have gone through the experience of authoritarian leadership, do as you're told, both
Yes.
at home with parents and
be professional.
Be professional, right? We have all these different labels or contexts within which we are expected to live as team members, and there
Yes.
is purpose for all of it, right? However, this is the first time in history where I think you've had so many overlapping generations working together in
Yes.
the workspace, and so it requires the safety of everyone to feel safe so that they can actually be vulnerable, so that they can actually share from their levels of expertise. You know, you'll hear some team members, the more mature ones, your baby boomers, or you know, the more mature folks say, you know, when it was my day, I couldn't talk to my boss like that, or I had to just do what I was told, you know. And
Yes.
you know, you'd have your millennials saying, well, you know, it's not your day anymore, you know, it's
Not
my
the
day.
dark.
And,
Yeah.
and I'm
But
not.
my kids would say, well, we don't live in those dark ages anymore.
Yes, yes. We don't live in those dark ages. And so, because we have such a beautifully blended environment for working, it actually gives us an opportunity to pull on all the different strengths that we have from each of these time frames and use them to create that safe space to be vulnerable, to share openly about the challenges that you may have with your energy alignment, or with being aware, or with creating a connection between where you sit in the organization and the purpose of the organization. So I completely understand the desire and the need for vulnerability, and certainly applaud you, Marlon, for creating that type of safe space inside of Symptai.
Thank you, Stacey. You know, as you were talking about blending, the word that popped into my head was actually diversity, because we haven't spoken about that, and that's a whole other thing here, probably another conversation. But just in my organization, I'm an old man in my company, and I think I'm young, and I think I'm in my 30s. Imagination really going well there, right? But I'm an old man in my organization, and I have persons who work here in this company who I started working before they were born.
Oh, wow.
So our different stories like that. So that whole idea of blending, and for
Yeah.
me, represents diversity. I remember I was growing up without cell phones and without this connected world and this connected age,
Yes.
and they grew up in it, and so my stories about what the world was like before that is completely irrelevant to them, because that's not their reality. And like, why you tell me those dark age stories? I don't live there. And so the whole idea of diversity for me is these different views from an age perspective in this case. Sometimes it's from a religious or racial perspective. And because we're also in such a connected world, right, then that blending, as you call it, becomes really important. And that we recognize the differences that people bring to the conversation, whether it's male, female, diversity we're talking about, just different facets of it, but the different perspectives that different people bring. And one of the things I always say to the team is that, listen, you guys are all brighter than me, right? And so what I'm trying to do is create a connected loop where I'm consistently tapping into your minds and your brilliance and your best ideas. And then I sit in a place where I can put resources to those things to have them executed and make things happen. And then why would I want to sit up here and be the one brain when I have 80 odd brains between the two companies that we have here, 80 odd brains that can find solutions to things and express themselves the way they want to express themselves. So yeah, so that vulnerability aspect brings a lot to the table.
No, that's good. Okay, so I would invite you to stop sharing, Marlon, and
All
I
right.
invite the persons who are a part of our audience to, you know, if you have any questions or comments, we would love to take them at this time as we bring the discussion to a close. So the conversation that we started off with was really about leadership reimagined, and Marlon has shared his 3+1 areas of mastery for reimagining leadership. And when you think about, well, what does it mean to imagine? Because that's the whole context of this conversation. And I love Albert Einstein. And when I started to investigate Einstein, I didn't
Yes.
realize how much of an Imagineer he was, and one of his famous quotes
Yeah.
is that imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress and giving birth to evolution. And in this space of digital transformation, that's what's actually happening. We are giving birth to evolution. I mean, how fantastic is that? To
Yeah.
literally stand in that, right?
Yes. We are imagining the world as we would want it to be.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I said at the beginning of the conference when I was in the opening was that the digital future is here because we're living in the age of speed. And I'm talking about digital speed, scale, and scope. So more than any time else in the history of humanity, the thing that you imagine today can be created tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years ago, we could have been imagining all these things all we want. There was no way to create it. We actually had to imagine things, create the tech, to then create the things that we imagined, right? And it's just absolutely phenomenal. It's really exciting.
Absolutely. And when we think about the way that the items that you mentioned, purpose awareness, imagination was one of those, and vulnerability is connected to giving birth to evolution, it actually removes the whole context of the technology, because the most important piece in transformation is not the tech. And we heard that several times over the last couple of days. We've heard so much about how important it is for us to really sit in the people side of things, because transformation actually begins and ends with people. The tech
Yes,
is just an enabler,
yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. When I think about the tech, I think about like things like robotic automation. The tech doesn't get tired, the tech doesn't need to eat, and it's going to do the same thing repeatedly over and over again. I mean, it's more intelligent than that because it's intelligent learning, imagination, tech, right? I think Andre is trying to join me, but so I'll sort that out with my producer in just a second. But the tech is just one piece of it when we think about that, right? But it's the people that it starts and ends with, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that was really key in the symposium over the last couple of days was the intent behind it is to really identify and support conversations around the digital future being now. And when you think about imagination and the power of imagination, it actually comes from the perspective of seeing yourself in the future and bringing that future into the present moment. And so I'm seeing myself into this situation where Andre is going to come on and he is going to be talking about maybe the questions that have come in or any comments that have happened, or advising us on the next steps that we're going to be taking to actually bring it to a close. But on a more serious note, though, I think all the conversations that have been had, I hopped into a few of the sessions, and there was a lot of creativity and a lot of talk about innovation and about enabling businesses. A lot of talk about things that were at one point just in imagination, like the cloud, for example,
Yes.
transforming your entire back office into a cyberspace. Being able to create security digitally, right? All of these things were things we may have just imagined, and so I feel that this conversation today really anchors the discussions that have been had over the last couple of days in the symposium, and also really gives us some insight into how you are choosing to lead Symptai into the digital future, which is actually happening at this very moment.
Right. So Stacey, I've been I'm checking my phone here. One of my team members is asking this question, which is, how important is it for leaders to be comfortable with not knowing? And there's actually a big argument going on in the chat that if I don't answer this question, then I'm going to be put up on a cross. Like, Jesus and meet the same fate. So the question is, how important is it for leaders to be comfortable with not knowing? Right. And that is, I would say, is extraordinarily important. And I talk about blind spots a lot inside of this organization. But outside of that, it, I don't think people understand that when you sit in a leadership position, that you are putting together a set of factors to get to an outcome. It starts as an imagination. It starts as an idea that there's something that you could create. And it's not this linear concept. You're learning and growing along the way, and you're discovering. So what you try to do, so like for us, we adopted OKRs and started to do agile and started to look at things in 90-day buckets, because we realized that over the course of a 90-day period, so many things can change. And some of those things have nothing to do with us. The external environment. Imagine those companies who had their 3-year strategic plans just before the pandemic. And that plan involved rolling out more brick and mortar.
Yes.
And then the world shut down. It had nothing to do with them, right? So there is so much that we don't know. And it's important for leaders to balance that. And I use the word balance because sometimes the people that you're leading get scared if they think that you don't know. So you have to learn who the people are and balance and kind of balance how you have those conversations with them. But it's important that you create that open space for persons to contribute, to let people understand that we're going along this path for this period of time towards these outcomes we're learning along the way. You know, what we've learned has told us that we need to stop doing this. Yes. And to start doing something else. So let's go. But some people are not comfortable with that. They're looking and go like, he doesn't know where he's going. He was going that way yesterday, and now he's going that way. And people kind of, and you try to get them to understand you're learning. If it were all linear, every business would be successful. Everybody would achieve their targets, you know. So it's vitally important that we recognize that we live in a space of not knowing, even now when we live in this great age of so much knowledge.
Yeah, and I'd underscore that or add to that by saying or answering the question with it's very important for leaders to be comfortable with not knowing. And I actually believe that as a leader, that's when you kind of know that you are stepping more powerfully or standing more powerfully in your leadership space, because you can be in your zone of there are different zones of competence, right? And your zone of excellence is where you feel confident because you know. But there is a zone higher than that, which is your zone of genius. And it is all about feeling passionate and excited and ready to create change, because whether you know or not, you believe in what it is that you are doing. You're passionate about it. You have an intention behind it. You are purposeful about it, and you're in the imagination space. And I think what happens with many leaders, especially when you're shifting from middle management into senior leadership, is that you become more in that space of what I don't know, because it's new things that are being created. And you're also bringing people along on that journey, and there's lots that you don't know. But that's where the opportunity lies. It's in actually getting really comfortable with the discomfort, so that you can actually create now different levels of greatness for yourself. You can tell your team, look, I don't know this. Let's go research and find out, right? Make it somebody else's job to know. Part of what a leader's responsibility is for their team members to actually come with the solutions
and to grow.
And to help to support their leader in growing, versus coming with the complaints of, Lord, Imarshi, they don't know what they're doing, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, let's figure it out together, right? Let's learn together. You know, you brought up the point about the time that we live in as, you know, the time of extraordinary knowledge being available to us. And it is also the time where your knowledge becomes obsolete in a year or two. So what you know today don't make sense in the next 2 years, right? Because we're changing at that velocity. And so continuous learning and unlearning and relearning
that's good.
is so key to actually being able to create transformation within your organization and within the people that have to deliver on these transformation initiatives.
Absolutely, that's really good, especially the unlearning part.
Oh, yes.
One of the things that we struggle with quite a few things. I mean, sometimes by no means a perfect organization. We struggle with quite a few things, and one of the things that I try to get the team to be aware of is like when we're dealing with changes in processes and trying to get us to stop doing things that we used to do, because we have a habit. And I think when Brandon was doing his presentation earlier this week about digital transformation, there's a habit. He talked about over engineering. There's a habit to just build on top of.
Yes.
There's not a habit to rip that out and go, well, that was great. It served us 5 years ago, and it was really great. It's time for us to stop doing it.
Yes.
And do something else, because of course all the emotions associated with change that people get really uncomfortable around, right?
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think this has been, as I promised, or as I intended, a riveting conversation about reimagining leadership. We touched on purpose and the way that purpose is critical for the leader as well as for enrolling the team. We talked about awareness, and that awareness is really required when we are getting ready now to shift from that big visioning, that strategy level, to now start to think through, well, how are we going to actually execute this? And then we talked about imagination and the importance of having an alignment between the rocket and the fuel, where imagination is the rocket and energy is the fuel. And that vulnerability sits at the base of all of these things, because we want to feel that we have safety and approval in coming forward to say, I don't feel connected to the purpose. Help me to feel more connected. I don't know about awareness. Help me understand how to become more aware. And my imagination is a bit stuck today. My energy is a bit low. So have some empathy, or give me some of yours, so that I can actually support the organization in creating whatever the next great thing is that we're doing. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you so much, Marlon, for these very insightful areas of mastery. And I would now love to hand over to
I see.
someone.
Yeah, I see Andre is coming in and to join us
Yeah,
in just a
I see him.
second.
I see him.
I want to thank you very much. Thank you both very much for that very riveting session. It's been insightful. It really has been, and definitely a great way to end this 3 days of event. So today, just to recap, we heard from Dana Deher, research director at Infotech, and she spoke about the importance of defining a digital business strategy. That keynote session underscored an important point that has been echoed a couple of times over the last 3 days, which is this: we have moved away from having a business strategy separate from a digital strategy. And right now, we're seeing a combined digital business strategy. And that is the way that organizations continue to move forward. We also heard from Minister Floyd Green, Minister without portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister. And he talked about how Jamaica is on a mission to model the Estonian example of digital transformation, starting with the infrastructure for the national ID system and the rollout of a national broadband. In his words, there is a real opportunity for the private sector to partner with the public sector to drive this transformation initiative forward. Stuart Hilton spoke about the importance of selecting the right technology stack to support the transformation agenda, and outlined a process for solution selection. Andrew Nooks joined me later to talk about how organizations are changing and the need for IT leaders to move to supporting the business from a business enablement perspective and deliver greater value to the enterprise. Ruben Burton, senior consultant here at Symptai Consulting, looked at cloud migration and some of the things that organizations need to keep front and center of the conversations as they move to the cloud. Andrew Simpson, Chief Operating Officer at Tier 1 Financial Solutions, spoke about opportunities in an upside-down world and the way that businesses need to rethink traditional approaches to management and innovation. Joel Freckleton, Solutions Advisor at Tier 1, shared a presentation on automating compliance and some of the operational challenges and how to overcome those. Author and international privacy expert Jason Cronk talked about privacy by design and talked about the importance of building privacy as part of the acquisition, development, implementation, and management of the application stack. And then we also heard from Marlon Cooper and Stacey Hines, who just completed their session on leadership reimagined, and what an insightful and thought-provoking session that was. So we've come to the end of 3 half days, 3 really exciting half days, and it's been quite interesting, packed with conversation, packed with lots of thought-provoking speakers, packed with insightful bits that we can actually now take away and implement into our organizations. I'd love to thank everybody who contributed to making this a really, really successful event. In 3 half days, we heard from 35 speakers in 29 sessions, and speakers have presented from 8 different time zones. And for the most part, it has been seamless. All of that has been possible because of technology, and indeed a great example of the indisputable fact that we are now living in the digital future. As we bring the curtains down on the first staging of the Symptai Symposium, I'd like to thank all of the attendees, presenters, and facilitators. The event wouldn't have been the same without your presence. As you can also imagine, an event like this requires extraordinary amount of planning and management. Thanks to the Symptai team, who have worked extremely hard behind the scenes to plan and manage the entire event. Without your contributions and commitment, this event would not have happened. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Sagicor, NCB Group, Tier 1, and IAPP. Your contribution has made a significant difference. All the sessions are now available on demand. Please feel free to catch up on the session that you may have missed, or to rewatch sessions that you may have found really insightful and valuable. It's been our pleasure to host you over the last 3 days. And until next time, the digital future is here.